lies will be exposed.
Absolutely. Welcome, everybody, to Hard Lens Media. I'm your host, Kit Cabello. We got a lot to talk about, and we are starting this episode off with an outstanding commentator, political analysis, someone who's been a voice for the people as well. She's a contributor to Revolutionary Blackout Network, as well as having a very popular channel as well. I'm so glad to have her back on because she has been leading the way and a voice for power. Give it up for the one, the only, Sabby Sabs.
Hey, Kit, thanks so much for having me on.
I know, and thank you so much for making time. I know you have a very busy schedule and you got a lot to work for your programming as well. So first of all, in regards to this election cycle, there's a lot that's been happening, especially with third parties and independents. So I just kind of want to get this out of the way right now. Look, we both know that third parties and independent candidates really haven't been getting a lot of time on air, or they're getting smeared and slandered. But recently you had Dr. Shiva on your show, and, you know, I have to say, look, I'm all for third parties and independents having a voice. But when the question for Black reparations came up, it went sideways. So I just want to hear your side of the story. What happened? We saw the videos. I'm not playing it because I know for a fact that YouTube will hit us. But in regards to this, I just want to get your thoughts, your perspective, because I, for one, didn't like how you were being addressed. But I want to give the floor to you.
Sure. So I guess I should start from the very beginning, because I think here's something that a lot of people don't know. I actually did not reach out to him for that interview. His assistant contacted me and told me that Dr. Shiva was on the ballot in Massachusetts and asked if I could bring him back on the show. So that was the second time that he came onto the show. First time, same thing. They reached out to me. I didn't reach out to them. So there's that. I just want to put that out there in the open so that people understand. Because a number of people were like, why would you bring this guy back? Why did you invite this guy back on? Like, I did not invite him. But it would be wrong for me to turn someone away, particularly a third party or independent candidate, especially considering they just got ballot access here. Like, that would be wrong for me to do. Right. So he came onto the show. And we do have disagreements. So the first time that he came on, we had disagreements. And the first time he came on, he pretty much talked about himself. And I was trying to get him to talk about his campaign, because that's what people wanted to hear about, the fact that you're running as an independent for president. But he decided to make it about himself. And I invented email, and I am not a natural born citizen, but it's not even a defined thing in this country. I did this, I did that, yada, yada. So it was a lot just about him and not his campaign. So this time when he came back on, I wanted to make sure to talk about his platform, his campaign, and what he had to go through for ballot access. So it started out pretty good. At least I thought. I disagreed with him on the natural born citizen thing. The reality is Dr. Shiva was not born in the U.S. He cannot be president of the United States. Whether he agrees with the definition, whether he agrees with the law, that's a different thing. But to sit there and to tell people that there's no defined or there's no definition for a natural born citizen is ridiculous. So there's that. So we were going through his campaign, going through his platform on his website, and he talked about a number of things. We talked about Israel and Gaza. We talked about the economy. We talked about his feelings on abortion, because that's another issue that's on his platform. So I wanted give him the opportunity to explain to people where he's coming from with that issue. Again, I did not agree with him on those issues, but I felt like it wasn't hostile, but all of a sudden, when it came to the question about a Black agenda for his platform, which, to be fair, every presidential candidate that has come onto my show, I've asked them about this. So this was no exception for him. And it was very clear to me that I don't know if he's doing research about these podcasts before he appears onto someone's show, because some of the things that he was saying to me, it was like, you're talking to the choir. It just seems like he seems to have this assumption that he knows about certain things, but other people don't know. Now, I'll give credit where credit's due. I'll give him credit for, his discussion during the pandemic. Yeah, I gave him credit for that. But however, me asking you that question, which I've asked every presidential candidate that's come onto the show, what is your agenda for Black Americans? He didn't have one. And honestly, that could have been a shorter conversation if he just would have said, you know what? I didn't think about that. I actually don't have, that's something I can work on. That's something I can improve on. I asked Jill Stein this question. I asked Dr. West this question. Like everyone that has come on, I asked that question. So I don't know why he thought that he would be exempt from that. So then we brought up the issue of reparations. And I think it's very important that people understand the difference between, which I didn't get a chance to finish because he kept interrupting me, the difference between racial justice and reparations. Right. Reparations is a debt that is owed to descendants of slavery in this country. Racial justice is something different. So if you say you're fighting against police brutality for the treatment of unarmed, Black men, that's racial justice. If you say that you want to target the criminal justice system because Black men are disproportionately represented in the criminal justice system compared to their white peers, that's racial justice. And the reason why you don't blend the two is because what has happened in the past is when you do that, then you have other groups that are not descendants of slavery that will try to say that they have a stake in that reparations claim. And that's what I was trying to get across to Dr. Shiva, but he decided to start cussing at me and all other types of things. If he would have just let me finish, that conversation could have been wrapped up pretty quickly, and he would have understood why I said you don't mix the two.
Yeah, I have to say, I'm not going to repeat it, but the tirade afterwards was rather insulting, and it's just something that's not my cup of tea. And I would expect more from a person who's running from the highest office of the land to have a little bit more decorum and have a little bit more tact in the way they are conversing with podcasters or political commentary shows. And I for one, was just appalled by it. I just was like, okay, well, if you're not going to answer the question, you're going to start acting like a child. You're not a serious person, and you could drop all the F-bombs you want. But as soon as you start making accusations, and I didn't like what he was saying to you, it's just more of, okay, you're a waste of everybody's time and space. But I think that's a perfect segue into something else here. And that's something I have not seen, especially here in Chicago as well. On the South and West Side neighborhoods, a lot of Black communities are giving the middle finger to the Democratic machine. And I have to say, Sabby, at this point, I don't think you and I have ever expected the amount of pushback from the media or either that, the neoliberal Democrats towards Black voters or any voters in particular, because we're seeing that coalition in 2020 fall apart. And if anything, I want to pull up this video here. And this is a preview that came on your show yesterday, to be more precise. If I'm wrong here, please correct me. But I just want to play just a few, play this minute-long video of you having this conversation with Black voters, as well as the fact of how Black voters are either that choosing not to vote third party, or surprisingly, voting for Donald Trump. And we're seeing the numbers boost up.
I'm here in Boston with Black voters, and we're going to have a discussion about the 2024 presidential election. So sort of a roundtable, casual discussion here. How does everybody feel about the 2024 presidential election? Raise your hand if you're excited. Nobody's excited. Nobody's excited. Why are you not excited? Let's start with you, Jabari.
Why am I not excited? I guess a general sense of disinterest and disillusionment with U.S. politics. Of course, the Democrats and Republicans have different aims, different groups supporting them, but yeah, I see the election as largely a popularity contest, one with pretty big implications for the future of the country. But yeah, it doesn't inspire any joy or excitement in me to think about voting or engaging in electoral politics, really.
Yeah, and I think that's the consensus I've been hearing from a lot of people. Tia, why are you not excited about the election?
Well, I'm kind of not excited about it because, one, I kind of see it as a gigantic dumpster fire waiting to happen, and kind of like it seems like it's just going to be a push for the American people to have to choose between one person who doesn't have the people's interests at heart and another person who doesn't have the people's interests at heart. So it's kind of like, just feels like it's something that's just happening all over again.
All right, that's a fantastic conversation. And if you haven't checked it out, please check out Sabby's channel. But overall, Sabby, I want to get your analysis and perspective on how there is a breakaway from traditional Democratic voting blocks from the DNC. And from my perspective, and I think everyone else can agree, the Democrats are panicking because they're losing voters that traditionally they would just take for granted for.
And this is the message I was trying to get across to Dr. Shiva. When you are running for president, it's really not on the voters to come to you. You should come to the voters, and you have to convince us why we should support you. So what you're seeing happen, I think after the rise of Barack Obama, I think a lot of Black Americans are just not interested in supporting the Democratic Party or voting at all, to be honest with you. And I think that, and I've tried to say this before about someone like Kamala Harris, anyone that comes after Barack Obama that is a person of color, they're referring to Kamala Harris as black woman. We can debate about that, but they're going to have a more difficult time, because a lot of us were really excited about Barack Obama. I know I was in 2008. Yeah, and there was a lot of energy around that campaign.
I remember it.
And yes, we remember all these things. I just remember thinking things are going to change. And I believed Barack Obama. And obviously we saw that did not happen. We had the 2008 housing crisis. Black people lost wealth under Barack Obama's presidency. So Black wealth tanked under him because he chose to bail out Wall Street instead of the American people during the 2008 housing crisis. That disproportionately affected Black Americans, particularly Black elders that lost their homes to predatory lenders. And for someone like Kamala Harris to come in as quickly as she has, she's kind of risen pretty quickly. She was senator. Next thing we knew, she was running for president in 2020, and then she became vice president. And now, Joe steps out of the race, and now she is the candidate. You have to prove to us why we should support you. Now, I'm not supporting her, but to just assume that Black people should just get in line and vote for you just because you're supposedly Black, it's disingenuous. And I can't believe that the Democratic Party has not learned this lesson. If you listen to a lot of the corporate media pundits, they seem to be surprised. They seem to be shocked that Kamala Harris's numbers, particularly with Black voters, is behind Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton, and Hillary Clinton lost. So they have slept on the Black community for a long time. And they have just assumed that we're just going to come out and support them. Now, don't get me wrong. The majority of Black voters are still going to vote for the Democratic Party because they believe that the Republican Party is worse on the social issues. That's really what it comes down to for a lot of voters. But the reality is the majority of Black Americans do not vote. And if you look at the data, you'll see since Barack Obama's presidency, Black voters, our numbers have decreased over the years. That's why you're seeing what you see right now, the numbers with Kamala Harris. I would argue if Joe Biden were still in this race, his numbers would be lower than they were in 2020 as well, because you're not doing anything for the community. It doesn't matter to us that you are hosting a town hall with Oprah. I don't care that Usher comes out and endorses you. These people are celebrities. They have no interaction with the everyday working class people. You rarely see these people come into the Black community and talk to Black people. Those people are rich. They got their money and they moved on. And a lot of them pulled up the ladder behind them and didn't leave that ladder down to help out people to follow. And that's just a reality. So I think what Kamala Harris and the Democratic Party have done, they have decided over the years to take Black voters for granted and to prioritize other groups. I've talked about this before. I interviewed Jamal Green. You've interviewed Jamal Green. We've interviewed people in Chicago, New York, also here in Boston that are being taken for granted. And meanwhile, there are the migrant communities that have come into those particular neighborhoods. And you have local Democrat politicians that are giving them more benefits than they're giving the Black people that live in those communities. This is only a matter of time before people were going to be outraged. So that roundtable that you saw that I did there with Black voters, I just wanted to sit down with everyday people, not people that were handpicked by CNN or MSNBC. Some of these people, they've worked on other campaigns and they want you to believe that these are just everyday people. Most of the time, they're not. I want to be very clear about that. So if you knew a lot of their backgrounds, I think people would say, oh, wait a minute, I didn't know this person was a part of the Obama Foundation. I didn't know this person had canvassed for Obama. That's important for people to know. Those people that I sat down with, those are people, most of them that are living below the poverty line. and their needs have not been met. And they're dealing with housing issues. Pastor Wheeler, who was sitting at that table, is being removed from his apartment complex. They're tearing it down.
Right.
And you don't hear the Democrats like talking about this. So they're bringing on all these people that are a part of the PMC. They're a part of that professional managerial class. And they want you to think that this represents the majority of Black people in this country, and it doesn't. Or they bring on voters that went to an HBCU, or they go to HBCUs to do these focus groups. The majority of Black Americans are not attending HBCUs. The majority of Black Americans are not attending college because they can't afford to go. And so when you choose to only focus on a certain segment of the voting population based on class, even if we would put the racial issue aside, based on class, you have already lost the working class. And there's a reason why you're seeing more working class voters support Donald Trump. The Democratic Party hasn't figured this out.
It's a lesson that the Democrats refuse to learn from, especially in my city, which is again, you hear about the Democratic machine. I mean, the first image that should come up is going to be the Chicago Democratic machine set up by Old Man Daley. And Chicago is still a hyper segregated city. But what we're seeing here is a massive pushback against Brandon Johnson's administration. You've had Jamal Green on the show. He's mentioned how Brandon Johnson's been an absolute disaster with his administration, especially with the sanctuary city crisis that's happening here as well. And, already it's a powder keg that's ready to explode. And this mayor that we have here in our city just doesn't have what it takes and is refusing to take any accountability whatsoever, which has caused a massive backlash. And earlier this summer, we actually had a chance to interview somebody who is calling for a recall for Mayor Brandon Johnson. Now, there's a whole process to doing that, which again, knowing Chicago, there's a lot of political red tape, but it got a lot of support from predominantly Black neighborhoods in the South and West Side areas of Chicago that we have never seen before. And before anyone says, well, Chicagoans, you voted for Mayor Brandon Johnson, voter turnout's been abysmal here in this city. It's not the Chicago people voting for it. It's only those who are still subservient to the Democratic machine or loyal to it or thinking that they could change it with a vote. There's a whole process to tear it down. I think we have a better chance in trying to create a more representative republic in DC than we have getting out the corruption in Chicago. But anyways, maybe I'm overthinking it. But the voter outreach now to even try and get Black men to support the Democratic Party is going to backfire. And I want to play this video that's been going viral. It's just only a few short seconds, folks. But Democrats, if you think that this is what's going to get people to vote, anyone, not just Black men, but women, men, of all races, if you think by shaming people it's going to work wonders, it's actually going to work the reverse, because everybody will say, well, F you.
Hello, ladies. I'm Trey. It's good to be here.
What do you do and how much do you make?
I work in finance, making 6 figures.
How
Good.
tall are you?
6'5".
All right.
Do you have a plan to vote in November?
Nah, not my thing.
They thought this was a good idea. Sabby, is that what's going to get everybody to vote, especially Black men to vote?
No. Oh my God. After everything Obama said, shaming Black men for not supporting Kamala Harris, the problems is with you brothers, not out there supporting Kamala Harris. You thought that ad was a good idea. I don't know who is in charge of advertising for Kamala Harris's campaign or messaging for her campaign, but I don't know. I would like to have been a fly on that wall when this decision was made. Number one, not only is that ad shaming Black men, but it's also classist. What do you do for I make this amount of money, I'm this tall? Like, it makes it look like Black women in particular, due to that ad, are classist. We only want to talk to you if you make a certain amount of money. And then the how tall are you? Like, what is this? So I don't know who thought that was a good idea, but to then, bust the balloon after he says he's not voting. Again, you don't owe Kamala Harris your vote. Kamala Harris has acknowledged herself that she has to try to earn it. You're not going to earn the vote of Black men with stupid ads like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and people are responding right now in the live stream chat that that commercial was lame, that it was weak, that Disney designed it. Like, if you are trying to reach out to voters, you have to give them something. And at least try and bring it back to my city. There's been so many promises made by Democratic politicians that, if you vote for us, we're going to make sure the schools are going to be funded, that the roads are going to be paved, that the streets are going to be cleaned, that we're going to stop violence. But we've had Mayor Lightfoot, who, I'm just going to give this one example, purposely told snow drivers, snow plows, not to plow in certain neighborhoods because there were members in those said communities that were against her administration. Now we're seeing Mayor Brandon Johnson, who is recently had a meltdown towards the press in regards to how his administration is facing corruption, and also how his administration is refusing to really change things in regards to how we pick our school board, which, again, every mayor has done so, but it's never been up to the public. And the public finally wants to weigh in regard to how we handle our schools, because it's been abysmal. Every single mayor has been a disaster. And the Democrats are just not understanding that people want something. Now, I'm not saying Trump is going to be better, because I don't think Trump's going to make anything better. I mean, I like to live in an ideal world where the president of the United States and our senators and our representatives actually do their job. But then again, that's a fantasy, and I got to come back down to reality. We want to see our leaders succeed. We want to see our leaders represent us, but we're not getting it. So a rational reaction to all this madness is, well, I'm not going to vote for you. And I have said this before. Your vote is your vote. However, which way you're going to vote, it is your perspective, and it is your right to make that decision. You should not be made to feel guilty in choosing not to vote, or voting third party, or maybe even voting for Trump. And the Democrats as a political institution are going to die out. You've had Jamal Green on the show, and I don't know if he's told you this story, but he went to one Democratic event and there were nothing but old people there. There were no young people. So how do we, I don't want to say reform the Democratic Party, but how do we get to a point to where we get rid of all of these parties? Because trying to reform the Democratic Party is a fool's dream. Cenk and Kyle failed with that with Justice Democrats. We've seen the failure with AOC and Bernie Sanders, but we have to break away from this. Otherwise, nothing's going to change. What is a solution that we can go to so that people are still engaged politically, but not being suckered into this, this is the most important election of our lifetime, which it is not?
You'll have to start on the local level with this. So Roger Meadows has been preaching to me about this for quite a long time. But if you start on the local level, you can do this through a ballot initiative to eliminate all political parties. Now, unfortunately, all states aren't ballot initiative states, but that's where the start can be, because I don't think you can start to tackle this on the federal level. I think you'll have to start on the local, and all politics is local anyway. So when you look at a lot of the politicians that are governor, mayor, city council, if you start there first, outlawing political parties, that could really make a difference, because it's true. Like, people are basically, they're trapped inside these two political parties. And regardless who the candidate is, like I said before, I'd argue you have the Democrat voters that are loyalists to the Democratic Party, and you have Republican voters that are loyalists to the Republican Party. Regardless who the candidate is, those people are going to support the party. So how do you prevent that? Imagine if we didn't have political parties. Imagine if candidates were just running and they weren't attached to a party. I think then you would start to see a shift when it comes to electoral politics, because then you would be forced to focus on the candidate's policies. And a lot of people are not doing that. Yeah, there's some people are saying, oh, what about Project 25 or whatever? But I'm talking about the loyal party voters, the ones who are going to support the party, regardless who the candidate is, regardless what their platform is. You have to find a way to break up those parties. And that could really change the game. I talked about this yesterday. There is a guy named Dan Osborne. He's an independent candidate. He's running for Senate for the state of Nebraska. And right now he is neck and neck with the Republican incumbent candidate. So this guy actually has a chance to win and to get that seat in the Senate. And if he comes in as an independent in the Senate, that could also really shake things up in DC. And so I saw an interview with him recently. They interviewed him on MSNBC. I think they had to, because he's so close in that race. I don't agree with all of his policies, but one of the things that he said that kind of, stood out to me is that he said that I'm not going to coalesce with either party. When he was asked, like, which party would you caucus with? He said, I'm not going to caucus with either party. And I think that's more of what we need. Also, this is a union guy, right? He started the Kellogg strike in Nebraska. So he is that going for him. So starting on the ground with the workers and then deciding like to run for office, which is similar to what Shama Sawant did. But I think it's going to take more candidates like that. Like I continue to say to this day, if you look at the squad members, all of those people should have been in a separate party. All of them. They should have never gone into the Democratic Party. Maybe instead of Justice Democrats being the strategy to reform the Democratic Party, maybe it could have been called something else and it would have just been a third party. And then we wouldn't be in this. We could have already seen this disruption of the two-party system.
There's so many things looking back at 2018, because I remember covering this on the radio with my colleague Daniel in regards towards third parties and the Justice Democrats. And there was this idea of hope of maybe reforming something, but you can't reform something that's so corrupt to the core. And Cenk and Kyle, when they made Justice Democrats, I don't think they really put any assurances in there of it, making sure that their candidates, their people, would still be beholden to said organization, because they just threw them out there in the wilderness and not expected them to be corrupt or either that to say, hey, thanks for getting me into office. Now, bye-bye. It says a lot about the organization skills. And unfortunately, I don't see the great coalition that we saw in 2016 and the remnants of it in 2020 coming back together again until the House is officially fixed and people like finally detach from the Democratic Party, because it always seems to be the same. Hey guys, let's have a progressive movement, but let's still be connected to the Democrats, when we know that's going to be a complete disaster. I mean, they're not going to listen to us. Kamala and everyone else in the Democratic Party is trying to browbeat and yell at people and talk down to them. And then we're hearing more about censorship. We have Hillary Clinton, who's apparently advising Kamala. And I kind of want to, this is going to be like the final question here, where you have the same Hillary Clinton and even Kamala to some extent talking about regulating speech, independent media, podcasters coming out. And again, they're trying to come after conservatives, but I've seen this before. And I know that all of us in this space, are also going to be affected by that, because now I'm hearing Kamala talk about restricting the First Amendment, restricting free speech, having big tech regulate on shows like ourselves. They're going to go after conservative outlets, but it's just a bigger threat overall. So do you see a big shift and change happening towards independent media and I guess the war on free speech?
I do. And I've been warning people about this. I hope people are now more willing to admit that the fascists are not just on the right, that they're also part of the Democratic Party as well. Like everything that you see happening under the Biden-Harris, that have happened under the Biden-Harris administration, different levels of fascism, but it still exists, like trying to suppress our free speech rights, the constant censorship. These are big red flags moving forward. Now, not to say that you should support Donald Trump either, but I think you need to ask yourself this question about, do you support free speech? So we're seeing this country is crazy, right? Like America, out of all the countries, just become more and more fascist, just become more and more, suppressing free speech, the censorship, it's through the roof. And you're right. They will start probably with the conservatives, but then they'll make their way over to the people that like you and me, people they call like far left. They'll make their way over towards us too. So I think number one, it is incredibly dumb to have Hillary Clinton, the loser, advise you. She's completely out of touch with the American people, completely out of touch. And I think this could be part of the reason why Kamala is also now showing a decrease of support among young voters. When she first announced, like she was doing pretty well with the numbers according to the polls, but now she is seeing a decrease with younger voters too, because now that she has been speaking more, people see, oh yeah, you're not going to be any different, So, and there's also, and I just covered this recently, there's also this shift with young men moving over towards Donald Trump. Number one reason they said is economy. I mean, it's the writing is very on the wall. I don't know who's going to win. I just know regardless, we lose.
I feel it's going to be 50-50. I mean, it all depends on who's enthusiastic to support either candidate. And maybe, I don't know. Again, we're going to be covering the election on election night. Harlan's Media. We're going to be streaming on Kick, Rumble, and on YouTube, and of course, pulling up the map here. But with the amount of excitement and, of course, the two horrific incidents that happened to Trump, I do see him maybe in the slight advantage of winning. Again, we will see, but election integrity in this country, as someone who lives in Chicago, election integrity, what's that? Because I've never seen it. Again, it is up in the air. It's 50-50. All depends on who's really going to turn out to vote. I am ever hopeful that the Libertarians and Greens are at least able to succeed or get past the 5%. I mean, that would be a sight to see, but I'm not banking on that. Again, would love to see it. But in regard to your show, and final question, Sabby, is there any event that our viewers and subscribers should know about? Anything that's happening right now so people can follow you and follow all your great work? What's going on? Is there any interviews coming around down the road that we need to be aware about so that people can check it out on your show?
Yeah, so Lucy, also known as Blue Moon Red Wine, she's going to be on with me tomorrow night, Tuesday night at 7 p.m. She's running as a write-in candidate challenging AOC. So should be interesting.
All right. Well, done deal. I'll be more than happy to see that interview. And we invite Blue Moon Red Wine to be on our show as well, so she can talk about her campaign, because I'm always happy to give a voice to third parties and independents. So as always, Sabby, by the way, there's something I noticed, and I got to say this. You have a remarkable poster behind you of a lot of beautiful people there. I think even yours truly, Kit Cabello's right there from the Zago brothers. Have to give them a shout out. So Zago brothers, you got to clip this, because that is one hell of a poster. I was not expecting anything like that. I've seen, especially starting off in the space, like you see like an Avengers style, like people like our favorite comic. I was humbled as soon as I got the memo. I was like, I'm in there too, and I'm right next to Sabby. This is incredible. Like, I wasn't expect. That was not on my bingo card for this year. That actually made me smile after everything I've been going through this year. That's a remarkable piece of work. Do you want to give a shout out to the Zago brothers?
Absolutely. I know the Zago brothers did an amazing job. When I saw that picture online, I was like, holy crap. Like, these guys are incredible artists. Like, how did they do this? How did they get all of our faces so close together? Like, there's no way I can't draw. So there's no way I would be able to do that. But I just thought that was cool. And I was happy to be featured there. And it's a mixture of people. Like, it's not just people that are like on the left or, on the right. It's a mixture of voices. And I thought that was really cool.
And again, 10 out of 10. Shout out to I got to get mine framed up, actually, because I gave I actually got 2 copies, and I gave one to Daniel, and then I got one for myself. I got to frame that up. I got some family coming in, and I want to show them, like, hey, look at that right there. Look at this awesome photo. So again, Sabby, all the best to you. Thank you so much for being on our show. Folks, please follow her work. She's doing some great stuff. RBN is doing some great stuff. And on election night, hey, I'm making a ribeye steak, and I'm going to see the disaster play out. So everybody just take good care of yourselves and each other. And as always, Sabby, keep speaking truth to power.
Thank you, Kit. Bye.
All right.
You prove it's possible to sleep for days and to still think you're right here awake. The cost of living isn't much to make, but God, it's so hard to save. And when they told you everything was safe, were you safe? Were you safe? Were you safe? Were you safe? I guess this isn't such an awful place. Is that what you want me to say? You prove it's possible to sleep for days and I still think you're right here awake. The cost of living isn't much to make, but God, it's so hard to safe? Were you safe? Were you safe? Were you safe? Were you safe?
Fresh off the masses, the brand new cancerous growth, who has come here to vie for your vote. Come here to cry at the camps and to mourn at the shore for the bodies that float by the wreck of an immigrant boat. Then it's back to their luxury home, couple security booths and a moat. Couple cigars, little escargot, little booze and a soak. Just breathe in the steam and the smoke. Pink salt, lavender, candles are low. Shit, when you do what you do, gotta lighten the load. And he got a life of his own that's a sight to behold. And it's a lot to control, to decipher the code, or to siphon the soul. The cost of a good night's sleep for the working elite is a bargain, no matter the toll. Worth any wager, and that comes straight from the mouth of the means to the goal that will swallow us whole. Ripe for the picking if you don't mind mold, and you know I don't. Maybe we're pleasantly prone, maybe we're taking a licking, compliantly ticking and ticking and ticking, but never explode. No, I don't deliver the prettiest image, but damn if it isn't an accurate vision of natural fission, of rage at the system and abject heartbreak, patiently waiting for any who will listen. That little blue bird who was watching your words is a federal carrier pigeon, a Langley first. It's a patient observer who hears what it wants and is trained for the worst. Oh, you got nothing to hide. They'll be the ones to decide that after they root through your purse, after they read all your text, after they raid your apartment, confiscate all of its contents, then conjure up evidence out of the air on a wing and a prayer and malicious intelligence nonsense. Any presumption of innocence long since gone, right along with your comforts and constants. Historically, first they will come for the communists. So why in the fuck would I say I'm a communist? Well, it might be I love my community more than the monsters of opulence who are holding us hostage, who are vomiting promises. Might be I'm all done seeing our pensions and benefits harvested. Might be I'm all done watching the populace being disarmed in the guise of an armistice. Watching a woman collapse on the floor who will rise no more. She's wheeled out the door and you're next in line for the pharmacist. If you can get me to vote, it's a hard no confidence. But part of the charm of deception is politics wearing the mask of incompetence. It's all in the art of austerity, darling. It's all in the slide of the providence. Until home is as wide as your cubicle height and is only as deep as your coffin is. Maybe I'm miles away from impatience, aching to break off the head of the snake where the capital lust, reptile brain, and the margin of profit is. Like off with his. Like off with his.
I guess this isn't such an awful place. Is that what you want me to say? You prove it's possible to sleep for days and to still think you're right here awake. The cost of living isn't much to make, but God, it's so hard to save. And when they told you everything was safe,